On July 23rd, in a high-stakes matchup between the Phoenix Mercury and the Atlanta Dream, the WNBA's simmering tensions finally boiled over. But it wasn't a buzzer-beater or a controversial call that stole the headlines. It was a technical foul, a single whistle, a moment that left Sophie Cunningham ejected and Caitlin Clark visibly seething on the sidelines. What was supposed to be just another mid-season game turned into a flashpoint, not just for one team, but for the entire league. Cunningham's ejection came late in the fourth quarter after a physical entanglement with Atlanta's Rhyne Howard. The initial play didn't seem particularly out of bounds by WNBA standards. Some bumping, a hard contest, maybe a little extra elbow. But officials immediately assessed Cunningham a technical, then a second. And just like that, she was out. Cameras caught Caitlin Clark's reaction almost immediately. She didn't mouth off, she didn't wave her arms, but the look said everything. Disbelief, frustration, and something deeper. A spark of fury. What made this moment so volatile was what preceded it.
Caitlin Clark and JC Sheldon were getting heated during Fever vs. Sun, starting off with a shove by Caitlin, and then JC hit Caitlin in the face, so Caitlin gave her another shove, and that's when she was hit to the ground. But Sophie Cunningham came in and stood up for Caitlin Clark, hitting JC Sheldon.
For this first, I know you and JC go way back to the Big Ten. What was going on with the chippiness there, and what explanation were you given for the tech that you got?
There wasn't an explanation for the tech that she got. You know, I think it was pretty obvious that stuff was brewing. Right, when the officials don't get control of the ball game.
Yeah, well, I mean, you guys came for basketball. Let's talk about basketball. Come on now.
What do you think of just how you all were able to pull in the second half, Caitlin, in particular?
We're going to the Commissioner Cup Championship.
Let's go!
Pretty exciting. Y'all want to talk about that? Let's talk about that.
From your perspective, just what you saw on that play, how you interpreted what happened.
Basketball play, refs got it right.
Since then, the two had become unlikely faces of a movement. Fans dubbed the alliance Tres Leches, a tongue-in-cheek nod to the trio of Clark, Cunningham, and Lexi Hull. All white players, all outspoken, and all seemingly outside the WNBA's inner social political circle. It was a name that started as a joke, but morphed into something serious. A rallying cry for fans who felt Clark was being targeted, silenced, and even punished by a league uncomfortable with her meteoric rise. Tags like #FreeSophie and #LetThemPlay trended within minutes. Analysts, influencers, even politicians chimed in. But the loudest voices were the fans, and they weren't buying the official narrative. Was this about sportsmanship or something deeper? Cunningham's foul didn't look much worse than the constant physical play Clark has endured all season. Yet here was the league acting swiftly and decisively. Not to protect Clark, but to penalize the only player who had stood up for her. Even former players weighed in. One WNBA legend tweeted, "The energy doesn't match the crime. What's really going on here?" That tweet was retweeted over 10,000 times in a single hour. What began as a whistle turned into a wave. The Clark-Cunningham moment wasn't just about one game, it was about a growing suspicion that the league was trying to suppress a new wave of outspoken, marketable stars who weren't afraid to challenge the status quo. And for many, the timing couldn't be more suspicious. Just days after the All-Star pay protest, just days after Nick Wright's explosive comments about Clark's salary, just days after the conversation shifted from basketball to business, Phoenix was the breaking point, not just for Caitlin Clark, but for the fans, the players, and perhaps even the league itself. The message was clear. This wasn't just basketball anymore. It was a battle for control. What started as a single act of defiance, Sophie Cunningham's retaliation foul to defend Caitlin Clark, has snowballed into something much bigger. It birthed a phenomenon, a movement. A new kind of basketball alliance that doesn't fit neatly into the league's existing power dynamics. Its name? Tres Leches. The label started as a meme, but like all good satire, it caught on because it struck a nerve. Clark, Cunningham, and Lexi Hull, three players with vastly different backgrounds, but now united by circumstance, media friction, and one overwhelming narrative. They're outsiders in a league that doesn't seem to know what to do with them. Let's start with Sophie Cunningham. She's no rookie. A gritty physical player with a background that includes being a black belt in Taekwondo and even a high school football kicker, Cunningham has always embraced a confrontational, blue-collar identity on the court. But what changed in 2025 wasn't her playing style. It was her alignment. The moment she put her body on the line for Clark, fans noticed. They didn't just cheer. They followed. Cunningham's TikTok account reportedly gained over 530,000 followers in the week following her foul on J.C. Sheldon, a staggering number for any WNBA player, let alone a role player with little previous mainstream coverage. Her jersey sold out immediately. Retailers had to rush restocks to meet demand. The WNBA hadn't seen a player popularity spike like this outside of Clark herself. And that's where the alliance begins. Clark, the undeniable face of the league's future, was under assault all season, not just physically, but culturally. She was questioned, critiqued, even iced out in some locker rooms. And many of her Fever teammates were criticized for standing by silently. Cunningham, however, didn't stay silent. She stood up. And she paid the price, with ejections, fines, and, reportedly, quiet pushback from within the league office. Lexi Hull, meanwhile, adds a cerebral, more understated presence to the Leches trio. A Stanford alum and known locker room tactician, Hull isn't the type to make headlines with a shove or a stare down. But what she brings is allegiance. She's one of the few Fever players who's consistently voiced support for Clark, both publicly and behind closed doors. According to locker room reports, Hull has been instrumental in helping navigate the internal divide, and she hasn't flinched when that support has drawn side eyes from opponents or the media. But what makes Leches unique isn't just who's in it, it's what it represents. This trio isn't just playing basketball. They're making a statement about solidarity, about marketing power, and about fighting back against a system that many fans believe has tried to marginalize or minimize Clark's unprecedented impact. They're defying the unspoken rule that says, "Don't rock the boat," and instead saying, "Steer the ship." It's also about fan power. The WNBA is evolving, fast, and for perhaps the first time in league history, fan movements are influencing not just headlines, but player popularity, merchandise sales, and that's part of their power. For every die-hard supporter cheering them on, there's another segment of fans and insiders who see them as disruptive, attention-seeking, or worse, divisive. But whether you love them or hate them, one thing is now undeniable: they're a force. And as CBA negotiations heat up, as tensions boil in locker rooms, and as media narratives shift, the WNBA has to reckon with a new reality. This isn't just Caitlin Clark's league anymore. It might just be Leche's moment. The question is, how far will the league go to stop them? The news didn't come from a flashy press release. It slipped out in fragments, a sudden change in the rotation, a strange omission from the game day roster, and finally, a line buried in a local reporter's tweet: Sophie Cunningham has been removed from team activities indefinitely. Just days earlier, she was the most talked-about player in the league, lauded as a cult hero by Caitlin Clark's ever-expanding fan base. Now, gone. Vanished. No statement from the team, no clarification from the league, no answers from coaches. The silence was deafening. This wasn't just about a hard foul anymore, it felt like a message. Cunningham's ejection against the Connecticut Sun had already stirred headlines, but what followed seemed like a calculated decision, and that's what ignited the firestorm. Clark fans didn't just see a player getting disciplined, they saw retaliation. They saw a league trying to curb a grassroots movement. They saw Sophie Cunningham, once invisible to the national spotlight, now sacrificed for standing up to the power structures that didn't want Caitlin Clark protected, or perhaps even embraced. Social media erupted. The hashtag #FreeSophie began trending within hours of the report. TikTok edits painted her as a fallen warrior. Twitter/X, threads accused the WNBA of hypocrisy, contrasting Cunningham's penalty with previous, more violent infractions that went unpunished. For many fans, this wasn't just a basketball decision, it was a cult disciplinary measure. And then came Clark's response. She didn't hold a press conference, she didn't write a tweet, but her post-game interview after the next Fever game, without Sophie on the bench, said it all. When asked about the team's energy, Clark paused and replied, "We miss voices, toughness, leaders." In the absence of Cunningham, the Fever's chemistry seemed to wobble. Clark looked more isolated on the floor, her screens less aggressive, her spacing more congested. Cunningham, for all her rawness, had played the role of enforcer. Without her, Clark seemed vulnerable again. The conspiracy theories exploded. Was Cunningham suspended for violating league policy? Or for violating league optics? Was this the price of showing up for Caitlin Clark in a league where doing so has repeatedly been met with scorn, not support? Even insiders didn't seem to know. One assistant coach from a rival team, speaking anonymously, was quoted saying, "The league doesn't know what to do with this wave. Clark is too big. Sophie leaned into it, and that's dangerous in this climate." And that's the real story. Cunningham's removal isn't just about her, it's about what she represented. A player who went from mid-roster anonymity to front-page notoriety because she made one decision: to stand up, to hit back, to put her name on the line for someone who's been under siege since draft night. For Caitlin Clark, it was another gut punch. Another reminder that this league, while full of talent and passion, is still navigating its own identity crisis. A crisis that asks, can players like Clark and those who back her really thrive here? Or will the system always push back? Sophie's absence isn't just a suspension, it's a symbol, a question mark. And depending on how the WNBA handles it from here, it could mark a turning point in the league's culture war. Because if defending Caitlin Clark gets you kicked out of the league, fans aren't going to forget that anytime soon. Caitlin Clark had remained composed through months of elbows, slaps, bumps, and barbed commentary. She took bruises to the face, charges without calls, and constant disrespect with a quiet resolve. But when Sophie Cunningham disappeared from the Indiana Fever's bench, everything changed. At first, Clark maintained the same media-trained professionalism she had shown all season. She brushed off questions about officiating, teammate chemistry, and even the All-Star Game snubs. But after Sophie's removal, after the one teammate who had physically stood up for her was suddenly gone, something cracked. And when Caitlin Clark finally spoke, it wasn't subtle. During a post-game press scrum following Indiana's narrow loss to Seattle, Clark was asked a generic question: "Do you think this team is still building chemistry?" She paused. Then she fired. It's hard to build anything when people get punished for standing up for what's right. When toughness is treated like a problem, you don't just lose games, you lose who you are. The room went silent. Journalists froze mid-typing. Cameras zoomed in. Clark didn't stop. "Sophie is one of the toughest people I've ever played with. She plays with everyone." Just got called out. For months, Clark had been accused by fans, pundits, and even fellow players of being soft, of letting the league walk over her. That night, she dropped the politeness and went full commander. No yelling, no tantrums, just surgical, unapologetic truth. It changed the vibe. Suddenly, the discourse shifted from whether Clark deserved more respect to whether the league was ready to handle a player with her influence. And a willing entire Indiana sideline stood up during a hard foul Clark received in the second quarter. Teammates shouted. Coaches demanded review. Clark got up, nodded at the bench, and calmly walked to the line. It was a moment of subtle unity and a clear shift in tone. Later, when asked if she regretted her comments, Clark doubled down. "I've never been about drama. I've always just tried to play." But if people's exit remained unexplained, it wasn't just locker rooms that were reacting. It was the fans. and what began as a heated internal issue for the Indiana Fever exploded into a public referendum on everything: toughness, loyalty, fairness, and the future of women's basketball. Within 48 hours of Clark's press conference, Fever fans flooded social media, demanding answers. The hashtag #StandWithSophie trended nationally. TikToks and YouTube Shorts showed highlight reels of Cunningham for stepping up, about a league still struggling to reconcile its desire for mainstream attention with the intensity and scrutiny that comes with it. More tension came from outside, too. Nick Wright's viral segment about Clark's $70,000 salary struck a nerve, particularly when paired with Cunningham's situation. Fans saw a pattern. The league wanted the benefits of Clark's popularity, but not the burden of protecting her or her allies. It's exploitation dressed up as opportunity, one post read, but not everyone agreed. Some longtime WNBA fans, sports, even political shows were weighing in. The Fever's next home game was standing room only. Every time Clark touched the ball, the arena erupted. But when cameras panned to the bench and didn't find Sophie Cunningham, the boos started. For the first time, the league felt what it had long asked for: spotlight. And with it came a new question. If fans now have the power to lift a player like Sophie Cunningham to stardom, could they also hold the league accountable for keeping her off the court?